A fragile ceasefire hangs by a thread in the Middle East. All red lines just turned to ash. Iran unleashed 4 salvos of ballistic missiles into the Zionist occupation on Sunday night. Its first direct strike since the ceasefire took hold in April, after a Zionist assassination raid in Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, that targeted Hezbollah. The Iranian military warned that Israel had crossed all red lines, vowing that in retaliation would bring more crushing and regrettable blows. Now, with the region teetering on the edge, President Donald Trump tells Fox News on the phone the missile volleys are certainly not going to help negotiations, while urging the Zionist occupation to stand down and Tehran to get back to the table and make a deal. But with fire in the sky and fury on both sides, that table is already splintering. Our panel of experts on All 24 News Special break down the contradictions, the economic and geopolitical tremors shaping the next phase of this escalating crisis. All this and more shortly. Hello and welcome to All 24 News Special with me, Islam Said. To dissect the military, economic and political dimensions of this crisis, I'm joined tonight by an esteemed panel of international experts. Let me start with Ms. Davishapan, geopolitical analyst, joining us from London, focusing on the global south and energy security. Ms., great to have you with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
Our pleasure. And also we have Mr. Mohammed Krissassi, geopolitical observer and financial analyst from New York. Thank you for being here with us again, Mr. Mohammed Krissassi.
Always pleasure to be with you, and let's hope for a good show.
And let me introduce Dr. Khodr Zarour, expert in MENA, U.S. foreign policy strategy and international security at NC State University in Raleigh. Great to have you with us, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure, sir. And also, last, we have Ambassador Batu Kotilia, Senior Fellow and Geopolitical Analyst at the Delphi, or the Delphi Global Research Center, joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, sir. And let's begin with you, Ms. Davishapan. Following Israel's strike in Beirut and Iran's subsequent missile salvos, one question emerges here. What specific strategic shift prompted the Zionist occupation to carry out the Beirut attack, knowing it could shatter the fragile ceasefire with Iran?
Well, let's be precise about what this strike actually is or was. The Israeli military's attack on Beirut was not a defensive response to an imminent threat, but rather a premeditated act of aggression against a sovereign capital city dressed in a language of strategic doctrine. And Israel's security establishment have called it a recalibration. And what it actually means in a unilateral decision to abandon a ceasefire framework the moment it no longer served Israeli expansionist objective. And the justifications offered that Hezbollah's infrastructure has been consolidated rather than dismantled, in the same logic that has been used to justify every single Israeli military escalations for over 2 decades now. And it is a self-perpetuating rationale. Any period of relative calm becomes evident of regrouping and therefore a pretext for next offense. And there is no condition under which this doctrine permits peace. And similarly, Netanyahu's coalition has consistently framed any restraint as a existential compromise, which tells you everything about a political function of this war. Maintaining military escalation is not incidental to this government's survival, but rather it is central to it. And on a legal dimension, this cannot be understated because strikes on densely populated Beirut constitute a direct challenge to the foundational principle of international humanitarian law, the obligation to distinguish between combatant and civilians, the requirement of proportionality, and the duty of precautions. And when a state knowingly targets urban civilian infrastructures in a capital city, it is not operating in a legal gray area under any rigorous reading of additional Protocol 1 of the Geneva Convention, the burden of justification is extremely high, and I do not think Israel has met any of it.
Let me turn to you, Mr. Mohammed Krissasi. As diplomatic talks between Washington and Tehran stall, tensions are rising again amid disputes over sanctions, for example, frozen Iranian assets as well, and renewed military warnings from Iranian officials. So how close are both sides to losing what remains of diplomatic momentum?
Well, to be frank with you, I should say in a short answer, not too much. But, let's resume a little bit here the factuality. You have the diplomatic momentum between Washington and Tehran has been further weakened by today's escalation between Iran and Israel on today, June 7, 26. Iran launched a missile attack against northern Israel, the first direct attack since the fragile April ceasefire we talk often. Israeli authority reported that most of the all incoming missiles were intercepted, which is fine. But when you consider that Washington is trumpeting each and every time that Iran doesn't have any power, maritime power, doesn't have any flight, doesn't have 75% of their missile was destructed, I am surprised that you have still, not surprised, but I think Trump will be surprised to revise a little bit his rhetoric as well and Netanyahu regarding what's going on with the power and the resilience of the Iranian people. Again and again, we talk about Iran war all the time. Now is Iran, Israel, and USA. Don't forget this attack was initiated at the insistence of Netanyahu for the last 40 years to attack Iran on the pretext that they have nuclear power. Number one, Iran never had it. Number two, Iran did far too hard to don't have it. And number three, Israel have it and nobody is asking anything. Then they use it as a deterrent, or so-called deterrent. But again, the incident that you have today highlight again the fragility of the ceasefire. Don't forget, we talk about ceasefire, but 3 times America break the ceasefire that you are offering to Iran. The first one was the 10 days and then 30 days and now the 60 days. But while they are offering this, they're still attacking, targeting Iran. And then today, the action that you have, although that, I am against any kind of attack on any civilian. But when you are attacking Iran, when Israel saying openly that they want America to continue the war, until last week when Trump used some expletive formula that I cannot say here on the show to Netanyahu to tell him you have to stop that. Now, in the beginning, it was a war of choice from Trump because he submitted to the muse of Netanyahu, thinking that he make him believe that it will be like a walk in the park like Venezuela or Cuba or Greenland or even Canada. Mr. Trump want to do all this. They have someone for the first time in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. You have a country that stands to Israel and hit Israel after warning and always military target. And today the attack on Israel, it was part of the ceasefire, even though Trump said no and Netanyahu lied to his teeth. It was part of the first ceasefire that everything had to stop, every kind of bombardment, and they didn't listen. So the exchange, of course, of today is not surprising. I was thinking that is going to be, even it was a fragile ceasefire, that is going to be kind of common sense coming back. As I said many times,
let me talk to one thing you have just mentioned. Donald Trump and Netanyahu held a phone call tonight. Do you think that, Netanyahu will stand down after Trump's call?
I don't know if Netanyahu will stand down because he's so stubborn. And sometimes he doesn't care. But now here you have the person who financing this war, and it cost me as an American citizen, $2 billion a day, if not more. Then he told me you have to stop. Not because he doesn't want to protect Israel. It's not the issue. Is what Netanyahu is doing goes all against what Trump is trying to do, to stop the war and have a safe facing. Let's be frank here. America now lost this war.
Thank you.
Mediatic war, on the ground. And Israel still continue. Not Israel, I should not say that. Netanyahu is a warmonger. Netanyahu, if he doesn't have a war with his neighbor, he cannot stop. But here we are talking about America and sick and tired of doing a war by a proxy. This war doesn't bring me anything near than America.
The point is quite clear here. Let me include Mr. or Dr. Khodr Zarour. Mr. Khodr Zarour, what does this exchange of strikes, if we talk about it here, I mean, the Zionist occupation luncheon, assassination raids on Beirut reportedly targeting Hezbollah, while Iran retaliates with a salvos or barrage of missiles on the occupied Palestinian territories. What does this exchange of strikes reveal about the durability of the ceasefire that has been in place since April?
Well, I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu always has been since the 90s. He plays the wild card. Anytime there is a U.S.-Iran deal, U.S.-Syria deal, U.S.-Palestinian deal, he undermines it. When the Iran and the U.S. in April reached a deal, the next day he bombed Lebanon, killing over 1,500 people and wounding over 1,500 people. And yesterday, 2 days ago, I think the Iran and the U.S. reached an extension of the peace process or negotiations to 60 days. And next day, he bombed it this morning. He bombed Lebanon this morning. Mm-hmm. He always finds ways to undermine the United States. Unfortunately, President Trump is the only president since Reagan that has been dragged into war because of Mr. Netanyahu. This war has both sides, Iran and Israel, has vested interest. The right-wingers in Iran, the right-wingers in Israel certainly see a resurrection or rebuilding of their own ancient empires at the backs and the blood of the Palestinian and Lebanese people and the Iranian people, and the Israelis are suffering as well. So this war is a continuation, and unfortunately, the White House is not in control. We like to believe the White House is in control, but we have a lot of war hawks who are pro-Netanyahu, not pro-Israel only, but pro-Netanyahu, that want to see this war drag on because they have kind of a vision of the religious zeal, if you will, and that's why they bank on. I think this war will drag on until past the election. Maybe even the next administration has to deal with this issue. So remarkably, I think the American people are waking up to this. They don't want to see their money going to building settlements, displacing people. The Israeli Zionists are continuing to not only occupy Lebanon, they are beginning to sell real estate in southern Lebanon and displacing 1.2 million people and bombing, the southern district of Beirut. That will lead to further evacuation and torpedo any hope or any chance of hope that the peace process between the U.S. and Iran will take hold.
Which leads me to Ambassador Batu Kutilia. Ambassador, Iran's military has declared that the Zionist occupation crossed all red lines here by expanding its offensive into southern Lebanon, as well the Lebanese capital Beirut. This leads to a critical question. If the Zionist occupation retaliates against Iran's missile salvos, what would the more crushing and regrettable blows promised by or said by Tehran actually look like in practice?
Well, Iranian regime has one huge problem. They lost internal legitimacy when they opened fire to the civilian protesters. So as every authoritarian regime who is critically loses its own domestic legitimacy, they are resorting to extensive aggression or victimizing themselves. And we quite often seen they didn't appreciate it more cooperative international regimes or even administrations who had a constructive offer to Iranian regime, and they manipulated with this in a not very good faith, and the rest of the world was in more reactive mode. So at some point it reached a critical tipping point, and then we see more offensive actions against Iran. We remember them shooting down civilian planes or hiring hitmen. For example, in my country, Georgia, there was a recent investigations they hired Georgian citizens to kill Israeli rabbi in Baku, or the Iranian journalist, their opponent, who lives in New York. So yes, they went out of red lines. So these are the red lines they violated, and unfortunately, but Iranian people are paying the cost of this regime. And it's very unfortunate to see. I agree this fire and hostility should stop, but it should stop in a way that will not be resorted again when regime desires to create some kind of domestic legitimacy.
Dr. or Ms. Davishapant, let me paraphrase this question to you. Tehran has promised more crushing and regrettable blows if the Zionist occupation responds. So what military options does Iran still have in reserve beyond ballistic missile salvos?
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I do not have a doctorate yet, so it's Mr. Basha. Well, Iran's escalation I see as a multi-tiered ladder. And in practical terms, the IRGC has documented capacity for several escalatory options that go beyond the ballistic missile salvos. First, the drone swarms operation, as demonstrated in April 2024, designed to overwhelm the Iron Dome batteries and expose the Israeli air defense gap. Second, the activation of the full resistance axis, synchronized strikes from the Hezbollah remnants in Lebanon, the IRGC-backed factions in Iraq and Syria, and Houthi missiles from Yemen targeting Israeli shipping and territory simultaneously. And third, the cyber operations against critical infrastructure, Israel's energy, water, financial system are targets that Iran has already probed. So the phrase is a deliberate political signaling for a multiple audience, including domestic, regional, and international. And it is designed to restore this deterrence credibility that the previous ceasefire appeared to diminish Iran's strategic stature. Whether Tehran can translate that rhetoric into effective actions without targeting a direct US military response is a very central operational constant here. And I see that they are kind of navigating it right now. And what regrettable means in a diplomatic language is also very telling, because it implies that Iran would prefer not to escalate further, but also is framing that their hands are forced. And that framing matters enormously in any further negotiations.
Mr. Mohammad Krissasi, what's your reading on this? I mean, Tehran has promised more crushing blows against the Zionist occupation if it responds. I mean, are we looking at an unpredictable response that could be wider, or let's say more intense than the tonight's salvos of missile?
Yes, before I answer your question, if you allow me to do some check factuality with Mr. Ambassador, what he was saying about Iran, that they were killing their own people, and Iran lost international support from for this action. Number one, and I'm not so sure that Iran were killing their own people. They have manifestation. It was some issue there, and nonetheless, Iran is still a sovereign country, and you don't have to take that excuse to go and do a war. And if you talk, Mr. Ambassador, about respecting the right of these poor, as you said, the Iranian that have been killed, but why don't you talk about the 70 years of the poor Palestinian living under the sky in a prison? Why don't you talk about the 80,000 people who were killed? Why don't you talk about today's genocide in Gaza, when we are killing women, children, aging people? The last one was a baby with a bullet in his head. Why all of a sudden is Iran? Why don't you go to Ukraine when you have Russia, who is in confrontation with Ukraine, and it was a lot of civilian casualty? Why I don't hear that from you, dear Ambassador? Though, we have to watch here. And when you say that Iran is going and kill people, the Mossad is doing it for the last 75 years. The Mossad killed half of the scientists of Iran. Why don't we talk about that, dear Ambassador?
Mr.
Now,
Mohammad
to answer your
Krissasi.
question.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Carry on. answer the question.
Sorry.
Thank you.
No, but excuse me, Yasin, I would like to have some factuality here. I can understand that you can have our differences of opinion, but you have to do some fact checking. That's why I think we are going.
So,
Now
Mr.
I can
Mohammed,
continue.
yes, Mr. Mohammed Krisasi,
Yes,
what are we
let's
looking at
continue.
exactly here? I mean, talking about
Now, to answer your question,
Tehran's fulfilling its promise.
You have the strategic perspective. Iran remain, despite what Mr. Trump is saying every day, with several military instruments behind the direct basilic missile that they have, and they prove it on June last year, and they prove it also for the first month of this year when they were defending themselves against Israel, America, and the GCC country from which they were attacked. Now, however, each option carries different risk, cost, and escalation consequences. You have the Iranians still have the drone, and they possess one of the, regarding the military expert, they said that Iran possesses one of the region's largest drone arsenal and has previously combined the drone with missile attack to complicate the air defense system. And we saw that the drone and this impenetrable sky in Israel, it was like a Swiss cheese. The Golden Dome didn't do anything about the drone and the missile of Iran. That's number one. And then also you have the Iranian official. They have already indicated that recent missile strike could be accompanied by a broader drone campaign. So they are going to do a combination. And this, they still have that capacity. Contrarily, I reiterate about, all what you are saying, this systematic, or if you want to use another, the propagandist of Mr. Trump and his court. No, they still defend themselves. Now, that's about Iran itself. But you have also another element that you have to take in consideration, the regional proxy network that you have. Historically, Iran's most significant source of strategic influence has been its network of alien non-state actors, like the Hezbollah, for example. Like you have the Yemen, also in Syria and Lebanon. And rather than striking directly from Iranian territory, Tehran could encourage or coordinate attacked by this partner regional against Israel or U.S. interests. This approach offers Iran a degree of plausibility and deniability while expanding the geographic scope of the conflict. And then, of course, you are going to have the attack on the U.S. military facilities and assets, like you have the last week in Kuwait. And I will conclude on that, if you allow me. And of course, and all this, you have an economist, you have an economist impact. The causality of all this, the maritime energy distribution, of course, you have to take care of it when you have 45% of the cost now to go from the Detroit of Hormuz to, let's say, Asia, because of the insurance company, because they say it's too risky, and the country risk in economy is very important. And of course, the last thing, but not the least thing, you have the missile air defense and the cyber operation that Iran excel in it, and it proved it.
Thank you. Mr. Khudr Zarour, if we talk about the diplomatic front here, Trump told Iran, quote, "You've shot your missiles, that's enough," unquote. So President Donald Trump has urged Iran to get back to the table and make a deal, while also expressing displeasure with the Zionist occupation's actions in Beirut, the capital of Lebanon. I mean, the core question that revolves here, how is the United States positioning itself between the Zionist occupation and Iran in an effort to contain further escalation in the region?
Well, Mr. Trump needs victory, needs an agreement. He has been fighting for this for a long time. I think he was duped on February 28th of this year to start a war with Iran. I think now he's much more hesitant to do so, even though Mr. Netanyahu pushed him to join on a bandwagon, attack Iran tonight. Mr. Trump said basically, no, I think it's enough. We don't want to be part of it. We don't want to take part, because he wants to see an agreement that both sides could live with. Netanyahu cannot live with any agreement, because it means he's going to be facing court, the Supreme Court in Israel. He's going to be most likely serve some term in jail. So he needs to prolong the war. I think President Trump has been more hesitant. I think he's becoming more diplomatic. He's been more organized with his thinking. I think his policies are clearer, not clear, but clearer than they were before February 28, because he realizes the cost of the war. It's not going to be walk in the park like he did in Venezuela a few months ago. Iran is a different beast. The entire region is a very rough neighborhood, and I think he's becoming more calculating. Although the Secretary of War in the Pentagon, he is pushing for a war with Iran. But I think the other side, the doves in his administration, are very, very cautious. The military generals are very cautious, less optimistic about a war. They want to see an agreement as well. And of course, President Trump is looking to the November elections. He wants to see the Republicans maintaining control of the House and Senate. So he's not going to jump on the bandwagon with Mr. Netanyahu to restart a war.
Which leads me to Ambassador Cotillia. The same, point with the U.S. midterm elections looming. President Donald Trump is under immense pressure to deliver a win. Is the indefinite extension of this fragile ceasefire in the Middle East a genuine pursuit of peace, or merely a cynical political calculation by Donald Trump to keep gas prices stable and voters, if we can say, pacified until November?
That's the beauty of democracy. People elect their leaders in democracy based on a very diverse agenda, whether it's oil prices, foreign policy, domestic policy, economy, etc. And it's up to American people to make this decision, and we'll see how it happens. And just to replying back to the distinguished colleague from New York, that's the difference. That's why he kind of misrepresented what I said. I said that when domestic problems arise in authoritarian system, they tend to seek external aggression. Mm-hmm. Similarly, does Russian regime as well. Putin declared in revised history that Ukrainian state has no right to exist and Ukraine is not a nation. Exactly same way Iranian regime says that Israel has no right to exist. And that's the fundamental difference. But as of the American policy, of course, the midterm elections as well as the next presidential elections will determine in what type of foreign policy United States will resort. But on the other hand, we see that America has a much bigger role than just yet another country. And that's kind of American exceptionalism in global affairs, especially when the old post-Second World War order is gone. And it's gone because Russia, Iran, and China, they try to undermine it. What will be the next order, we don't know, but at least there needs to be some response to the terrorist behavior. And this terrorist behavior is the fact. Who was supplying the Shahid drones to Russia in the beginning of the Ukrainian aggression? That was Iran. Iran was supplying the same drones that are killing a lot of innocent Ukrainian child and women and elderly people in peaceful cities. And that's the same tactics now Iran is doing, shooting around the drones in the neighboring countries, that targeting hotels or civilian infrastructure. So this needs to be stopped. Whether Trump administration will be successful bringing this to some meaningful ceasefire or not, that's the challenge of his legacy as well. So I will not draw premature consequences till time is there. U.S. has much powerful leverages together with its allies than only military missiles. And I hope that the combined application of these resources eventually will bring all the rogue actors to comply with some kind of basic rules. And that would be a beginning of constructing new world order, whatever it might look like. But definitely I would not want to see the world order, and either you do, to be based on the spheres of influence and might has right principle. So therefore, I think it's very, very important now to create a solid foundation for meaningful diplomacy, but diplomacy cannot act without power and military might. Unfortunately, that's the reality, and that's why the defensive capabilities and also ability to apply political will to use this force when it's necessary is very, very important.
Ms. Davishapand, don't you think that President Donald Trump is caught in the middle? I mean, he has urged Iran to return into negotiations. How influential is this call likely to be in the current escalation cycle? And another question, and what are the prospects for de-escalation in the immediate future?
Well, Trump's call has limited immediate influence precisely because it is disconnected from the operational reality on the ground. That is how I see. And Iran's leadership reads the United States as having already committed to Israel's security posture unconditionally, and which fundamentally undermines Washington's credibility as a neutral mediator. And you cannot supply, I will say this, you cannot supply the weapons enabling the strike and positioning yourself as an honest broker for a ceasefire. That is not ethical. And that's it. Trump's call is not entirely without function. It is a pressure release valve, and it says that Iran moderates within a system a diplomatic cover narrative to pursue back-channel talks without appearing to capitulate under fire. And Iran has historically negotiated hardest when it could present engagement as a strategic choice rather than a concession to coercion. On the de-escalation perspective, the conditions for durable ceasefire require, at a minimum, a mutual security guarantee framework to halt to Israeli ground operations in Lebanon, and a verifiable Iranian commitment to constraint without its proxies. And none of those elements are currently in place. Short term, what is more likely is a managed de-escalation, which is a tactic understanding to pause operations to avoid a full-scale war neither side formally wants, while each consolidates its new territorial and political realities.
Ms. Davishapant, do you think that, regardless of the Iranian side here, do you think that Trump's call to the Zionist occupation to step down or to not to retaliate, could not stop the Zionist occupation to, launch massive strikes against Iran? And probably this could lead to, instead of de-escalation, could lead to a massive escalation in the whole region.
Well, that could be a possibility. It could be a possibility. We really have to, I wish I had an answer to that, but we really have to look forward what's going to happen. And yeah, that's all I have to say right now. But I think that this conflict is functioning as an accelerant and not as a originating cause. The structural erosion of U.S. unipolarity predates 2026, and it is traceable to Iraq in 2003 and Afghanistan withdrawal, and the growing perceptions among global South states that Washington's commitment are conditional on alignment rather than principles. And again, and China's positioning here is also interesting and highly deliberate. So I think each subsequent US policy failure in Gaza, Lebanon, and in Iran it strengthens China's argument that the rule-based international order is a selective instrument for Western power and not universal framework. And yes, we have to see how this trajectory moves forward.
Sorry for catching you off guard with this question, Ms. Pant. Let me include Mr. Mohammed Krisasi to the discussion. Mr. Mohammed Krisasi, we see massive global condemnation and domestic protests across Western capitals against the war in the Middle East. Yet political elites remain stubbornly aligned with Israel's military objectives. So how long can Western democracies ignore the overwhelming will of their own civil societies before facing a severe crisis of domestic legitimacy?
Well, your question is touching a long outstanding debate on democracy theory concerning the relationship between public opinion, between the elite decision-making and foreign policy. Historically, democratic governments do not always align immediately with public sentiment, even though this can be a contradiction in the definition of democracy. But unfortunately, this is what it is. This is factual, particularly during a period of conflict. Then, you know, that's something that, how can I say, the foreign policy decisions are often, because this is what you are talking right now, are often influenced by a strategic alliance, security commitment, institutional interest, and geopolitical calculation that expand beyond the electoral pressure. Even though, as Trump was stating long ago, that he said when they told him, the Republican Party being tired of what he's doing and this creation of chaotic world disruption in the world trade, not only the world, but the world trade, what did he answer? He said, you know, I don't care about that. Again and again, this is where democracy sometimes is very difficult to see what's going on, especially with a person as Trump with an ego that enormous. He doesn't care about anything else that what he look in the mirror and make him greater. We saw it when he was talking with the people with the NATO. We say it when he go to the World Trade Organization. And now we see it here in the world. He knows that he make a mistake. He knows that his people is a manifestation here in the state. Manifestation all the time, specifically on the university. Or now it come to the Congress. They're saying, where are we going here? And then, as I said, how can I say that? However, the democratic legitimacy ultimately depend on maintaining a perception that government remain responsive to citizens. Again and again, I will hear, I think you have a beautiful book who talk about that in Machiavelli, in the Discourse of the Prince. It's not the reality that count, it's how the people that you govern are perceived. They called Trump because they said he's the man of peace. Or this guy, he brings more than all the last president put together. And this, again and again, wherever the current opposition constitute an overwhelming will to stop the war, it's itself debating and varying across the interests of the country. We are talking about the oil. Again, I would like to say that America doesn't import oil, they export oil. So is, again, the financial interest of Mr. Trump, and he make $1 billion out of it, of this speculation. Now, to conclude, what can I say? The greater challenge for the Western democracy may not be an immediate collapse of legitimacy, but rather a gradual erosion of public trust, and it's coming. Politically, or I should say political system, to be more exact, generally are more resilient. They, at one point, they are going to say, where are we going? We have to defend our constitution. We have to defend the quote-unquote democracy. But now the issue is whether democratic government can temporarily act for the public opinion, or like now with Trump, whether they can sustain by that divergence and definitively without incurring the significant political institution cost. Look what Trump is doing with the Supreme Court. Look what he did with the people who did the manifestation, I'm sorry, because he lost the election. He went into giving fund to give money to the people who were, in his point of view, wrongly condemned because they were defending him. And for him, it was defending the democracy. So again and again, I try the best I can to say, but democracy is not, how Churchill was saying, is not the best way of governing, but it is no other way of governing to at least try to be a representative of the people. If not, you are going to have a dictatorship.
Thank you. Dr. Zarour, if we take a look at the wider region, the Gulf states are caught in an impossible position here, hosting U.S. bases, while facing direct threats of retaliation if the conflict widens. Have American security guarantees become a liability for the Gulf states? And are we seeing a permanent fracturing of the traditional U.S. Gulf security architecture?
This is a fantastic question. I think the Gulf states have invested trillions of dollars in the U.S. To protect them, to provide them security. Last summer, we have seen President Mr. Netanyahu attacking Qatar, and the U.S. did absolutely nothing, where you have the U.S. base about 7 miles away from downtown Doha. And then we have seen Iran attacking day and night last several months, attacking the Gulf states, and the U.S. is not able or willing to defend its allies. So I think it's not a permanently fractured relationship, but the Gulf states are already, since last June, we have seen Saudi Arabia reaching out to Pakistan, and Turkey is joining the bandwagon, so is Egypt. So it's not a permanent fracture relationship between the Gulf states and the United States, but I think the Gulf states are, and rightly so, reaching out to China, trying to have defense back. I think Russia, even though some people may not like Russia or welcome Russia into the Gulf states, but Russia is a player, whether we like it or not. Russia has nuclear weapons. Russia is a permanent member at the United Nations. So I think that the Gulf states is looking to the outside of the U.S. As long as the U.S. can control the high seas, as long as the United States remains a superpower or a global power, we will see the Gulf relying on U.S. protection somewhat, but much less so than it was before June 2025, with ongoing attacks by Iran on Kuwait and the rest of the Gulf. The U.S. is scrambling, to say the least. What do we do? What is the ultimate policy? Well, the U.S. has a lot of policies. We do not have a strategy. During the Gulf War, during the Cold War, we had a strategy: defeat the Soviet Union. And that has been accomplished, whether internal implosion or explosion, mainly implosion. We have seen now a rise of China, rise of India. We have seen the global South rising. So the U.S. cannot control all those challenges at the same time. On top of it, protecting the Gulf. We could not provide safe shipping through the Arabian Gulf. So that's a challenge we have tried the last 2 or 3 months. And we have seen the White House and the Pentagon scrambling. There is no military solution to this. Like terrorism, I heard 2 words today on this show and throughout the day: terrorism and democracy. And those terms are very vague. They're extremely broad. And we pick and choose what democracy means, and we pick and choose what terrorism means. We have not complained about the Shah of Iran before 1979. That was not a very nice guy, but he was an ally of Israel and the ally of the West, so he was a good boy. But while the Iranians who take to the streets, who are also being killed, then the regime is a terrorist network. So we need to be fair with ourselves. We have to be honest if we want to have policies that make sense. And this is the reason why the West in general, the U.S. in particular, that basically the hypocrisy is kind of, we're spending a lot of political capital trying to defend defend a policy that doesn't make any sense anymore. The rest of the world is waking up, even though I think you mentioned earlier why this disconnect between the people and the representatives. Voters, and at least in the United States, I could speak, my constituencies, we have seen the public who protest, yet the public officials don't respond to, they don't resonate their policies with their representatives. So there's a big, major disconnect between representatives and the leaders in Congress. So that has to be, if we want to have democracy, a democracy that makes sense, we need to listen to the people who are demonstrating. American allies in Canada, in Greenland, obviously, certainly Slovenia, Spain, are breaking away from the U.S. domination because of this hypocrisy. Unfortunately, this is what we have to pay for, unless we fix the mistakes of the past. We have UN Resolution 338, 224, that have not been implemented yet since 1967 war and 1973 war. I'm sorry, 224 and 338.
Point clear. So let me go back to Ambassador Batu Kolia. Ambassador, there is significant pushback from the American military establishment regarding the depletion of U.S. weapons stockpiles, munitions desperately needed for a potential Taiwan scenario. Is the U.S. military dangerously overextended, and how fierce is the internal battle in D.C. between the Indo-Pacific Pacific strategists and the pro-Israel Middle East hawks?
Yes, that's one of the major discussion here in Washington, D.C., and it's a very legitimate because we see a world of turmoil and military capabilities are necessarily needed everywhere, whether it's air defense systems for Ukraine to shield themselves and civilian cities from Russian ballistic missiles, or in the Middle East, or potentially in some other scenarios, including Taiwan. So that would be that leads us to the bigger issue and the question where we can see that, and that was a debate, like who was the number one enemy for a democratic world or democratic West, China or Russia or Iran. Unfortunately, we see that all these are interconnected, like connected vessels. So we cannot put the equal sign of equality between terrorism and democracy, or we cannot play an honest broker, unfortunately. But when we discuss good and evil, how can you put equal or honest brokerage? Can you imagine like having honest broker when Hitler was attacking entire neighbors? Yes, the evil needs to be defeated. And there is quite a significant breakdown of what it means, whether it's a domestic or exporting outside. And military capabilities will be needed. Unfortunately, the rest of the world, especially European allies of the US, they were getting quite a cheap or free security from United States. So one way or another, United States has unmatchable military capability, which has been extensively used. And whenever it comes to some security guarantees, either it's a collective security arrangements or bilateral security arrangements. But in the nutshell, it still dries down to American military capability. Now we have a new component in this equation. This is a economy of the war. There are sophisticated weapons that needs to be used or counter these threats, but also the economy of the war, when you need a more cheaper version to defend yourself against the cheap technological advances. Ukraine is giving a very good lessons to the rest of the world, and I think in the future we will see combination of this, using Ukrainian experience, but also ramping up the military production. And ramping up the military capabilities production is not just purely a business project, and there is a problem of long-term calculation, how long this will last, or what should be the supply chain, for example, critical materials like tungsten or other rare earth metals where China monopolizes it. So that's are part of the much bigger equation, but one way or another, this will decide the structure of economy in the United States, of onshoring most of the production and the developing capabilities. On top of it, we see that it's not only the missiles that are important, but also other sophisticated technologies like an artificial intelligence in terms of target acquisition and battle space management. That on one hand is a totally new contested domain where China has significant capabilities as well, and electronic warfare. So the spectrum of the necessities of the modern warfare widely increased. And I don't see any country, even as powerful as the United States, can single-handedly challenge it without building strategic partnerships. What type of strategic partnerships this will be, and whether it will be based on the common values only or values plus pragmatic interests, that needs to be seen. But I think that that would be an important layer of the next new world order, which we see now getting some shapes. But that type of military industry, defense industry, as well as bilateral or multilateral strategic partnerships will be one of the key components.
Let me include Ms. Daveshapand here in this point. Ms. Daveshapand, the United States exhausts its diplomatic and military capital in the Middle East. Nations, for example, if you take example like China and the broader BRICS coalition, are presenting themselves as the true brokers of stability in the region. Is this war accelerating the definitive end of the unipolar world order?
Well, I've mentioned this before, but this conflict is definitely functioning as an accelerant, and not as a originating cause. And as I've mentioned, the structural erosion of US has unipolarly predated 2026. And this is where China becomes very important, because they have started to position themselves in a highly deliberate manner. And I think it was in 2023 when Beijing backed the Saudi-Iran normalization agreement, which could be seen as a clear signal that Beijing could deliver outcomes in a region that US had monopolized for decades. And again, the question, we've discussed this before as well, the question is not whether unipolarity is ending. That debate is effectively being settled in the academic literature and increasingly in the diplomatic practices. So the live question here is what the transition looks like. Is it going to be more a managed multipolar system with functioning institution, or a more anarchic, competitive multipolarity driven by regional hegemonic rivals? So, however, currently, I assume that this war is pushing more to the latter trajectory.
The Fisher point?
Yes. So yeah, that's what I think. It's pushing us towards more a anarchic, competitive multipolarity driven by regional hegemonic rivals.
Thank you. Point clear, Mr. Vishapand. Let me turn to Mohammed Krissasi. Final thoughts, Mr. Mohammed Krissasi. From Gaza to Lebanon to Iran, the term rules-based international order is now widely viewed as a hollow Western, if we can call it, catchphrase. Has this war permanently destroyed the moral authority of the United States and its European allies on the global stage?
Well, I will give you an academic perspective before I answer the question. You have here to distinguish between moral authority, political influence, and material power. The current conflict, like my predecessor was saying, have, without any doubt, generated intense criticism of the United States and European allies across large part of the global south. Number one, just a footnote, a very footnote, all this country from the Occident, they were or esclavagist or colonialist, or they do genocide as well. And one of it was, again, the Jews during World War II. What we seems to be forgetting. But this has been said. The critique about, the Western government have applied international legal principle, but they don't apply it when it doesn't fit them. For example, Gaza genocide. You have at the United Nations, America vetoing 4 times a ceasefire when a genocide was taking place in Gaza. Thanks to my country, I'm from Algeria, I'm very proud of it. Our ambassador was fighting, and finally, at the 5th time, we have, not that they vote for the ceasefire, but at least they abstain. That's how the American, the Occident is losing credibility. Now, we can say that, this perception with all what's going on, with this inconsistency and the violation of the international right. Our colleague was saying before about the resolution at the UN. How many resolutions you have at the UN that were not applied because it was Israel? And then again and again, this is why the Occident is no credible, because you have historically, like Algeria and France, for example, you have 132 years of colonization. You have American in Vietnam, what they did in Vietnam. You have, the English in India. Of course, the credibility cannot be without memory. I know what you did. And I know what you're capable of doing, and I know today what you are doing. What is the difference there? The difference is that you don't have the moral authority, as I was saying before. The moral authority is not there. How can I come and talk to you when I know that you see a genocide and you didn't do anything? That's very, 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 very strong for the global south, and then to look at America, what they are doing, and the Occident, what they are doing. Less, as my colleague before me was saying about China. Yes, China is having ground now in Africa, for example. And why? Because the, how can I say, the quote unquote, the beautiful democracy of the Occident, they are democracy for themselves and not for the other that they used to consider like slave, and they used to take their land and they build their wealth, stealing all the riches of this country.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed.
In conclusion, if you permit, go ahead.
We are short in time. We're short in time. Excuse me.
I'm sorry if I take too much time.
Dr. Zarour, the final question goes to you. Long story short, Iran has rejected temporary patches and is demanding a comprehensive lifting of sanctions and a regional reset. Are we inching toward a historic comprehensive agreement that redefines the Middle East entirely, or is the United States simply buying time before the next inevitable military escalation?
Yeah, this is unfortunately the process of muddling through. There is no complete solution. It's not going to be imminent. It's not going to be complete. And it's not going to be acceptable by all sides. So it has to be kind of broken into several parts. I don't think Iran will receive all the $120 billion and frozen in around the world, especially in U.S. market or banks. I think gradually they may get that, but they have, and the sanctions will be lifted eventually, but they have to sign that nuclear deal. And I think they're getting close to it. Again, I want to say something earlier, because from 1976 to 1979, the Israelis were helping Iran building a nuclear program. It was not a problem then. Anyway, aside from that, I think a comprehensive deal is not imminent. I think it will take some time. I think President Trump is realizing that, and I think he's being flexible. I have to give him a point, even though he miscalculated early on his administration, especially the previous administration. But I think he's capable. I think he has sidelined some advisors in his cabinet. I think with the doves in calculating diplomats, may be able to reach an agreement where both sides will be happy with.
Thank you, Ambassador. Briefly, to wrap up your segment, even if a permanent settlement is reached, China's footprint in the region is now undeniable. Can the United States foreign policy establishment psychologically and strategically accept a multipolar Middle East, or will they continue to fight lost wars to maintain an outdated hegemony? And be brief, please.
Yes. With all due respect, I don't think that we can now make a conclusion whether U.S. lost war or not. First of all, this war was not the choice of the U.S. I think, again, to zoom out, this aggressive revision started 2 decades ago. And unfortunately, what we are seeing now as, and I will repeat myself, symptoms of bigger systemic problem of the world order, whether we like it or not. But we have the old order is gone. This order, one way or another, after World War, brought a peace and freedom to many people. And I strongly believe in freedom of choice. So whether it will be respected through multipolar regional arrangements or bigger global architecture of providing security or assisting people who are fighting for their freedom, I think that will be a combination of those layers. And I think it's time to bring freedom on offensive and not only be reactive mode, but maintain the necessary means to support every individual and societies who are striving for their dignity and freedom.
Thank you. Ms. Davishappan, the last question is for you. If Pakistan's 10-point peace plan and ongoing shuttle diplomacy actually succeed in brokering a permanent settlement, how radically does this reshape the diplomatic hierarchy of the Middle East and Asia moving forward?
Well, I see it that it would be very structurally significant, because Pakistan brokering a permanent settlement would be the first time in South Asian state has ever served as a primary architect for a durable Middle Eastern security agreement, and that challenges the existing duopoly shared by the US and increasingly by China. And Pakistan's position as a Muslim majority nuclear state with institutional relationship on both the Arab and the Persian side gives it a very big legitimacy channel that neither Washington nor Beijing has fully possessed. And for Asia, it would even elevate Pakistan's standing considerably at a moment of an intense India-Pakistan tension and strengthen Islamabad's hand in multilateral forums, including the SCO and OIC. And the critical caveat is that brokering an agreement and guaranteeing it over multi-year implementation processes are categorically different challenges, and Pakistan's current political and institutional fragility makes the latter very difficult to sustain.
Thank you. We are running out of time, unfortunately. Well, we have to leave it there. My immense gratitude to Ms. Davesha Pant, Mr. Mohammed Krisasi, Ambassador Bato Kotilia, and Dr. Khadr Dr. Zarour for their invaluable insights tonight. Well, there you have it. The geopolitical center of gravity is shifting rapidly. To sum it up, Iran strikes first since April. Trump caught in the middle. The ceasefire is hanging by a thread, and that thread is fraying fast. Thank you for tuning in. Good night.